So good to be here. So good to be back. I was just here. Actually, Joe and I came to Phoenix the day after that debate I had with Mike Pence. So it's good to be back in Phoenix. And I want to thank Ruben Gallego, the most incredible congressman. He is a friend. He is a leader for Arizona. He is a national leader. Please give it up for Ruben Gallego. And Congressman Greg Stanton, again, a great leader who is a leader always fighting for the people of the state. Hiral Tiparini, she is going to get this done, candidate for Arizona 6. Phoenix Mayor Kate Gallego, thank you. What a powerhouse. So this is a good time. This is a good time. 6 days to go. And like Alicia said, we are here joyful, knowing what is at stake, and we understand that in fighting for all of the issues that will be determined based on the outcome of this election, we can work hard while still enjoying some good music, dancing a good dance, bopping our head, knowing that with joy and optimism, we fight for the things we believe in. This is not a fight against anything. This is a joyful fight for what we know can be, unburdened by what has been. That's what's before us. That is what is before us, Phoenix. And I'll tell you, in the spirit of the late, great John McCain, I'm here to also engage in a little straight talk. Because I'll tell you, for example, there's been a lot of talk from the current occupant of the White House about my values. Well, let me just tell you, in the spirit of John McCain, I am a proud, patriotic American who is very clear thinking about the values we as Americans share when it comes to knowing that the Commander-in-Chief of the United States of America should have as his first priority the health and well-being of the American people. I am clear in understanding this is the greatest failure of any presidential administration we have ever witnessed as a country. And I know that we are all prepared to stand for the democracy of our country and to stand for this country we love. And the challenges they're great. We are facing right now probably 4 crises that have converged at one time. Because of this pandemic, we're looking at a public health crisis that is what I've been calling one of the greatest mass casualty events we have experienced as a nation since World War II. We're looking at over 225,000 people who have died in just the last several months, many of whom, because of the nature of this pandemic, were without their family members for their last minutes and hours on this earth. We are looking at a public health crisis where a virus has infected over 8.5 million Americans who are going to face unknown long-term health consequences, including what doctors are telling us, lung scarring and things of that nature. And I bring this up and these numbers up because I think it is really important for us to understand it didn't have to be this bad. It did not have to be this bad. Thanks to a fellow by the name of Bob Woodward, we know that the President of the United States and the Vice President of the United States were informed about the nature of this pandemic back on January 28th. They were informed that it was 5 times as lethal, as deadly as the flu. They were informed it could hurt people of every age. They were informed that it was airborne. But what did they do with this information? They sat on it. They covered it up. They did not tell the American people. Instead, the President of the United States said it was a hoax. And then most recently, just in the last couple of days, had the gall to say we're rounding the corner on it. But Phoenix, can you imagine what you would have done if you had known on January 28th how serious this was? What you as a parent, what you as a working person, what you as a small business owner or someone who works for a small business, you as a teacher, what you might have done if you had known on January 28th. You know, because even before this pandemic, you know, Donald Trump was walking around talking about how the economy is great, right? But the fact is that in America, even before the pandemic, far too many families had to work 2 and 3 jobs to put food on the table and pay the rent. And let me just tell you something, in Joe Biden and my America, nobody should have to work more than 1 job to pay the rent and put food on the table. Even before this, we were looking at the fact that the average American family had less than $1,000 in savings. But how people would have prepared. Shoot, how people would have bought a little bit more toilet paper had we known what this was all going to be. And Lysol. But I make light of it because the reality is they knew. And they did not tell the people because they put politics in front of the priorities of the American people. And so we are now in this public health pandemic. But it is even worse than them covering it up. You do know that the President of the United States, with his boy, Bill Barr, are in the United States Supreme Court right now suing to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. In the midst of a pandemic. The Affordable Care Act, which was brought to us by President Barack Obama and Vice President Joe Biden and brought health care to over 20 million people who did not have it, protected people with pre-existing conditions so that they could not be denied coverage based on a pre-existing condition. Honk if you know somebody who has diabetes. Honk if you love somebody who has high blood pressure. Honk if you know somebody with breast cancer. Honk if you know somebody with lupus. And they're trying to get rid of it. You know, and part of it, I just have to say, you know, even when he was running for office, it was clear that the man just had this very weird obsession with trying to get rid of whatever Barack Obama and Joe Biden created. And this is just an extension of that. But here's the thing, Phoenix. We don't really want presidents who have weird obsessions, do we? No. Joe Biden is saying, instead of trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, Joe and I are saying, no, let's expand coverage. Let's expand coverage, understanding we need to bring down Medicare eligibility to age 60. Let's expand coverage in terms of bringing down the cost of prescription drugs, bringing down the cost of premiums. Let's expand coverage, understanding when we're talking about health care, the body doesn't just start from the neck down, it is also the neck up, and we need to have mental health care available for everyone who needs it. There is a clear contrast, a clear choice in this election about where we go from here. A public health crisis, an economic crisis. We are looking at an economic crisis that is being compared to the Great Depression. Over 30 million Americans in just the last several months filed for unemployment insurance. Here in Arizona, 1 out of 10 families is describing their household as having been hungry. We're not talking enough about that. I've seen numbers that 1 in 5 mothers is describing her children under the age of 12. We are in the midst of a hunger crisis in America. Here in Arizona, 1 in 9 families could not pay their rent or are worried about being able to pay their rent next month. Here in Arizona, 1 in 4 small businesses have gone out of business. And there is a clear contrast. Because on the one hand, you have Joe Biden, who when asked, how do you think the economy is doing? Joe Biden will say, well, tell me how working people are doing. Tell me how working families are doing. Joe Biden, who says, you want to talk to me about the economy, then let's talk about what we need to do. Because we are not going to raise taxes on anyone making less than $400,000 a year. We are going to increase middle-class tax cuts. We are going to ensure that families, working families, do not pay more than 7% of their income in child care. We know that the path to intergenerational wealth for so many families includes home ownership. So first-time home buyers will get a $15,000 tax credit for a down payment and closing costs. That's how Joe thinks about the economy. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who when asked, how's the economy doing, you know what he says almost every time. Well, how's the stock market doing? How are rich people doing? Which is why one of his first orders of business was to pass a tax cut benefiting the top 1% and the biggest corporations in America, to the point that we will be faced with a $2 trillion deficit. Well, let me tell you, if we do what we need to do in these next 6 days, Joe Biden and I are about to get rid of that tax cut. And invest that money in working families. Invest that money in building up our infrastructure, building back up our roads and bridges, building back up what we need to do around renewable energies. And that's going to be about millions of jobs. Because we know when you invest in the American worker, in American families, we as an economy will always do well. There's a clear choice in this election. The crises that we are confronting include a long overdue reckoning on racial injustice in America. And you have Joe Biden, who is informed about America's history and has the courage to speak truth and say the phrase, Black Lives Matter. Joe Biden, who understands it may be difficult to hear, but we've got to confront racial disparities in America, in our healthcare system, in our economy, in our education systems. Joe says we need to deal with small businesses, so many minority and women-owned small businesses who have gone out of business. And so we will invest $150 billion in low-interest loans and access to capital for those businesses. Joe knows we need to deal with the criminal justice system. It must be reformed, and do that, and do it in a way that is about getting rid of private prisons, getting rid of cash bail, which is an economic justice issue as much as it is a criminal justice issue. Decriminalizing marijuana, expunging the records of people who have been convicted for marijuana offenses. Joe Biden knows we have to deal with policing, and we have to hold anybody accountable who breaks the law. And so we will put in place a ban on chokeholds and carotid holds. George Floyd would be alive today if that were the case. We will say there needs to be a national registry for police officers who break the law, because you can't just do it in one place and then get fired and move to another place and get hired. That's not right. Joe Biden has the courage to speak these truths in a way that is about bringing folks together and fixing the problems we know exist. On the other hand, you have the current president of the United States, who went on a debate stage, debate before last, refused to condemn white supremacists, and then doubled down, saying stand back and stand by. And be clear, this is a pattern. This is the fellow who ran for office partly on a campaign theory to suggest that the first black president of the United States was an illegitimate president of the United States. This is the same person. There's a pattern here, Phoenix, who on the tragedy of what happened in Charlottesville, remember that. People were peacefully protesting racial injustice. There was a young woman who was killed in that protest. And on the other side, there were neo-Nazis wearing swastikas, carrying tiki torches, hurling racial and anti-Semitic slurs. And the commander-in-chief said there were fine people on both sides. A person who came into office calling Mexicans rapists and criminals. A person who came into office and one of his first orders of business was institute a Muslim ban. We deserve so much more. Let me tell you, Joe, in his heart, in his soul, is running knowing that we must bring our country together and give dignity to all people. Joe knows it is time to end this attempt to spew hate and division among us. It is time to end trying to get Americans to turn on each other. Joe knows the real sign of someone's strength is not based on who you beat down. It's based on who you lift up. There are real choices in this election. Let's deal with something that all of us on the West Coast and in this area of the world understand quite well, and it is that we are in the midst of a crisis in terms of our climate, and it poses a threat to us as a species, and we must acknowledge the science and deal with it. You've got Joe who says, I see what's happening. I see that you have the West Coast, my home state of California, you can Oregon, Washington, Colorado, all the fires, the wildfires, devastating. Entire communities are having to be evacuated. I have met with families that have been evacuated. I have met with firefighters who are fighting fires while their own homes are burning. My brother-in-law is a firefighter. The devastation is profound. You go to the Gulf Coast states. In fact, right now, what is it? Zeta is hitting Louisiana. It's the 5th named storm this year. I say named because they don't name a small storm. It's serious what it's doing in terms of hurting the livelihood and well-being of families. In the Midwest, floods to the point that farmers in that area of our country have lost a whole season of crops. We have to take this seriously. Joe says we have to deal with the science, but we have to see the opportunity in the crisis as well. One, the clock is ticking on this, and we need to act with a sense of urgency and put in place goals like net zero emissions by 2050. We need to understand that we have to have a protection of land and open spaces. We need to understand that an investment in renewable energies is also about an investment in jobs, an investment in the apprenticeship programs of our building trades, of the carpenters and the plumbers and the electricians. Joe understands what leadership looks like on this. On the other hand, you have the current president of the United States, who when approached by a journalist, and the journalist said something like, these wildfires are happening in California, and the scientists are saying, that the science tells us that these extreme weather conditions are a very big factor in what's going on. And do you know that the President of the United States of America responded, the Commander-in-Chief of the United States of America, he's supposed to be a worldwide leader, responded when being asked that question, science doesn't know. As though science is a person. Well, Mr. President, science does know. And it is time we take this issue seriously. So the stakes are high. The stakes are high, Phoenix. And you in this state. The reason I'm here, the reason I was here with Joe last time, I was in Tucson earlier today, the reason I'm here is to thank you, because I do believe you all are going to make a real statement about who we truly are as a country. You are. Arizona has a well-earned reputation for wanting truth talkers, straight talkers. Arizona has a long-standing reputation for no BS. Just get the job done. Arizona understands that come to me talking about issues that are the issues I deal with that keep me up in the middle of the night, that have me sitting at my kitchen table trying to figure it all out. That's what Arizona demands of its leaders. And in this election, that is what is at stake. Joe and I are very proud of the fact that in this campaign, we have built one of the broadest coalitions you've ever seen. We've got, of course, Democrats, but we've got Republicans, Cindy McCain, Jeff Flake, independents, people of all backgrounds coming together, understanding what is at stake. And the issues are, yes, the four things we've already talked about. It's so much more. It's about putting resources into our public education system. We will triple teachers' Title I funding. It's about fighting for civil rights, including LGBTQ rights. It is about immediately putting a pathway to citizenship and renewing protections for our dreamers under DACA. There is so much at stake. And I do believe, because of who you are, you will make a difference not only in terms. You know, this year we lost a great American hero, Congressman John Lewis. John Lewis shed his blood fighting good trouble, shed his blood on the Edmund Pettus Bridge for the right for folks to vote, right? For the right for Black Americans to vote when Black Americans were being denied the right to vote. John Lewis understood that was a civil rights issue. That was an issue about a statement of who we are as a country, which is why in John Lewis's life, he also was one of the first in line to fight for marriage equality, why John Lewis was one of the first in line to fight for immigrant rights. Because he understood this is about civil rights, and he paid a price for that by shedding his blood. So let's honor the ancestors. Let's honor the ancestors when we just this year celebrated the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. Let's honor those suffragettes who in their white marched and shouted and fought and dared anyone to tell them they were less than equal. And let's also, speaking truth, remember history that Black women, however, were not allowed to vote until 1965. But let's honor the ancestors, understanding it is our responsibility to take on what they fought for us to have as a right and to follow through with that. Number two, let's vote because of everything we have discussed that is at stake. There is so much that impacts us every day that is at stake in this election. And here's my third point about voting. You know, I'm traveling the country. I've been in Georgia, I've been in Florida, North Carolina, Ohio. I've been everywhere. I'm going to be going to Texas. So, you know, in 2013, the United States Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act, right? A case called Shelby v. Holder. They took out the ability of the Justice Department to enforce the need for fair voting laws. And immediately thereafter, in 2013, almost 24 states put in place laws that were designed to make it difficult for folks to vote. They purged the rolls, and they focused on Black voters, voters of color, students, our indigenous brothers and sisters, right? And so much so that in North Carolina, a court of appeal reviewed the case and said that they passed a law with, quote, surgical precision to prevent Black people from voting. That's how bad it's been. Not to mention the President of the United States at that first debate got up on a stage in front of 70 million Americans and, in my opinion, openly encouraged a suppression of the vote. And all of the states that are trying to make it confusing, I mean, states where you got to fill out the ballot, then put it in one envelope, and then you're supposed to put it on another envelope, and some states where you got to have then a third person sign the envelope. You know, states that are picking up the drop boxes so that people can't find it easy to drop off their ballots. States that are closing down polling places. The messing with the post office. The post office. The post office. Postal workers are like the best, nicest people you could ever meet. They're messing with the post office. And so you gotta ask, why are so many powerful people trying to make it so confusing and difficult for us to vote? And I think the answer is because they know our power. They know our power. And so let us not let anyone ever take our power from us. Let us use the power of our voice at election time through our vote. Because the power is with the people. And you know, when people say, well, what do you think about what's going to happen the day after the election? Here's what I say. America's democracy is always going to be as strong as our willingness to fight for it. So my last point is this. This moment will pass. And years from now, our children, our grandchildren, and others, they are going to look in our eyes, each one of us, and they will ask us, where were you at that moment? And what we are all going to be able to tell them is so much more than just how we felt. We will tell them what we did. We will tell them what we did. We will tell them we organized folks. We helped people get to the polls. We reminded people to vote early. We texted and we called and we emailed to the point that people got sick of us, but we knew they'd get over it. We did everything that was necessary to remind each other that we are not alone, that we are in this together, that we each have the power, and that we love our country and are prepared to fight for its ideals. And we will tell them we elected Joe Biden, President of the United States. Thank you, Phoenix.